That night, as the rain continued to fall and the city lights flickered darkly outside, the courthouse seemed frozen in time. The hallways were filled with a cold, expectant whisper, and the courtroom was tense, with every sound taking on meaning. No one suspected that at that very moment, a man would walk in who would upend the established order, whose calm and determination would spell the beginning of the end for a system mired in corruption for years. All eyes turned to the massive wooden door as it swung open and J.D. Vance walked in, carrying with him the weight of truth that would soon fall upon the most powerful man in the room. The light from the flickering lamps, reflected off the stern faces of those gathered, created an atmosphere of anticipation and fear of the unknown. There was a mixture of tension and determination in the air, and even those accustomed to the routine of courtrooms sensed that something momentous was about to happen. In this room, where people's lives were often decided in the blink of an eye, evidence was being collected that could destroy the established system. And so, as J.D. Vance confidently took a few steps forward, his presence sent an inexplicable chill down the spines of those present. Judge Marshall Davis, a man with an impeccably honed reputation as a stern arbitrator, sat behind the massive table and instantly felt his authority begin to erode the foundations on which it had been built for centuries. The pressure was mounting. The court staff, the lawyers, and the witnesses sensed a storm of change brewing. J.D. Vance, the embodiment of unwavering truth, slowly but surely began to lay out evidence that confirmed years of rumors of corruption, manipulation, and illegal financial dealings hidden beneath the veil of official court proceedings. His voice, even and calm, carried through the courtroom like a cry for justice, forcing even the most fearless to examine their own consciences. Each of his arguments was like a stone in the foundation of a wall of revelations built against the abuse of power. At first, Judge Davis tried to maintain control of the situation. His face, always stern and determined, gradually began to distort in the throes of realizing the approaching death of the old order. He tried to interrupt the speeches, loudly declaring that no evidence could undermine the foundations of his power, but every word he said only emphasized the growing uncertainty. Whispers began to sound in the room. The eyes of those gathered sought confirmation of the truth in the gaze of each participant in the trial. J.D. Vance took his time. He acted methodically, presenting facts one after another. Evidence of secret meetings, transfers of large sums to offshore accounts, documents that recorded conversations behind closed doors. With each new fact, his speech became more confident and the room more tense. At this point, there was a growing sense that a change had arrived. Judge Davis, once the undisputed master of the courtroom, could no longer hide his inner turmoil. His voice, once loud and authoritative, began to shake and his words began to falter. He tried to regain control, shouting that all the material presented was inadmissible, that its source was unreliable, but with each outburst, the truth became more and more obvious. The atmosphere in the courtroom changed. Those who had previously remained silent now dared to whisper, and some even made their first attempts to record the proceedings on their cell phones. Time seemed frozen, waiting for the climax when the law itself, embodied in the person of J.D. Vance, would finally triumph. Something unthinkable was looming over the proceedings. Judge Davis, overcome with fear of losing control, began to resort to extreme measures. His shouts echoed through the courtroom like echoes of long-forgotten rage, trying to suppress the onrushing tide of truth. But the judges could not hide the truth. The system he had once considered untouchable was beginning to crumble under the onslaught of facts and evidence. Amid his incoherent shouts, J.D. Vance, unperturbed, continued to methodically uncover the essence of the corrupt schemes. Each new statement, each mention of illegal transactions, made the courtroom shudder with the realization of the scale of the crimes that had been committed under his watch for years. Just when it seemed the fate of the entire justice system was at stake, law enforcement officers stormed into the courtroom. Their arrival marked the turning point. when the very system designed to uphold the law began to work against the lawbreaker. Judge Davis, who had held on to his power as a last resort, found himself trapped by his own fear and inability to confront the truth. The FBI, confident in their rightness, surrounded him, and at that moment the entire courtroom was filled with the sound of steel scraping and commands given with iron determination. J.D. Vance, evidence folder in hand, looked on with cold confidence, knowing that today would go down in history as the day evil was punished. In the courtroom, where until recently there had been an unshakable confidence in the power of authority, a real spectacle of justice began. J.D. Vance began to lay out a chain of evidence linking Judge Davis to secret meetings, illegal transfers, and bribery of high-ranking officials. His voice, quiet but unwavering, grew louder with each new detail. Every word he uttered made the audience wonder, what else is hidden behind the facade of this untouchable power? Like a magic key, his speech opened the doors to a world where corruption and impunity were replaced by harsh justice. People in the room, who previously did not believe in the possibility of change, began to understand that a new era was coming, in which anyone who abuses power will inevitably face consequences. Judge Davis tried desperately to hide the truth, shouting that the documents were forged, that the source of the information was unreliable, that this was all just an attempt to discredit his character. But the louder he tried to prove his case, the clearer the picture of the true events became. His accusations rang hollow, and each new piece of evidence from J.D. Vance fell like a hammer on a slope. The atmosphere in the courtroom reached a fever pitch. People's faces expressed a mixture of shock, anger, and relief, as if they were witnessing a historic moment when the evil hidden behind the mask of power was finally exposed. Amidst all this, J.D. Vance remained the embodiment of calm and determination. His gaze, firm and confident, pierced anyone who dared to doubt the true power of truth. He did not simply present evidence. He showed that behind every fact there were lives of people who suffered from lawlessness and unfair decisions. His speech, filled with cold logic and indisputable facts, became the very key that opened the hearts and minds of listeners, awakening in them the desire for change. The moment law enforcement officers quickly took Judge Davis into custody, the courthouse seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The final shouts and threats became a silent acknowledgement that a system that had once seemed unbreakable was finally changing. But that was only the beginning. What began as a single lawsuit soon grew into a massive movement that engulfed not just the courtroom, but the entire city. Hundreds of people, inspired by the courage of J.D. Vance, took to the streets demanding complete reform of the judicial system, fair elections, and punishment for all those involved in the corrupt schemes. The days and weeks following this momentous event became a series of revelations, new trials, and endless investigations. Every new document, every witness presentation, every retrial became another brick in the foundation of a new order, where justice once again came first. J.D. Vance worked tirelessly to prove that corruption could only be defeated by the power of truth. He spent hours upon hours in the office, contacting sources, analyzing data, comparing facts, and his every action served to destroy the foundations of the old system. But it was not that simple. Each successful step against corruption was followed by threats and attempts at intimidation. Those who had previously supported Judge Davis now understood that their time was up and began to disappear into the shadows, afraid to openly oppose the truth. However, as they say, light always conquers darkness. Public support grew, and each new step by J.D. Vance became a symbol of the fight for justice and honesty. His determination inspired not only those who were directly involved in the process, but also thousands of people across the country who finally saw that change was possible, that everyone could become part of the great story of the fight against evil. Night after night, day after day, the struggle continued. And although the system tried to resist, threatening to conceal information, falsify evidence, and even use force, the the truth gradually but inexorably broke through all barriers. Courtrooms, once filled with fear and despair, turned into arenas for real battles for the future, where each speaker was ready to give all his strength for the truth. J.D. Vance, pursuing his line of investigation, continued to move forward relentlessly, despite pressure and attempts at intimidation. His calm and determination became a bright beacon of hope for those who believed that evil cannot take root in the heart of society if there are people nearby who are ready to resist it. And then, on one of those fateful days when it seemed that nature itself was ready to pay homage to the truth, the decisive moment occurred. After months of struggle and investigation, when all the evidence had been collected and tested, in a courtroom filled with people thirsting for change, the command was finally given that would change the course of history. Law enforcement officers, confident in their rightness and backed by indisputable facts, surrounded the powerless Judge Davis and declared, "Today, justice will prevail." It was the moment when the courthouse, which had seemed a fortress of impunity, became a symbol of a new era in which anyone who tried to abuse power would inevitably suffer what they deserved. At that very moment, J.D. Vance, standing in front of the camera, addressed everyone present, and as if conveying a message to the entire nation, said words that will forever be imprinted in memory. "Today we have proven that truth is invincible. If you believe in justice, if you are ready to fight for the truth, make your choice. Let every like, comment, and subscription of yours become a symbol of the fact that darkness retreats before the light of truth." These words, spoken with firm confidence and a deep sense of responsibility, became the final chord in this great battle, uniting everyone who dreamed of a world where corruption and evil have no place. In the days and weeks that followed, the fight continued. Cases were uncovered one after another, evidence continued to pour in, and the public never tired of cheering for its heroes. Each new trial, each new victory over corruption, gave hope that change was possible. The judicial system, once plagued by fear and manipulation, was gradually being cleansed of its stains of injustice, and those responsible for the abuses began to realize that their time was up. J.D. Vance and his associates became a symbol of rebirth, proof that even the most powerful system could be defeated if the right people stood up for the truth. And so, after months of struggle, when the old foundations had finally collapsed and a new era of justice was beginning to emerge, a final hearing took place in the courtroom that summed up the entire dramatic story. Judge Davis, now deprived of all power, stood before the law that he himself had once distorted to suit his own interests. His final words, full of bitterness and indignation, dissolved in the applause of people who believed that justice had been done. J.D. Vance, with a folder of evidence in his hands, took the final step toward the final recognition of truth and justice. His look, full of determination, said that even in the darkest times, the light does not fade. From that day on, a new era began, when any evil, any corruption, wherever it lurked, was doomed to meet resistance. The people, inspired by the example of J.D. Vance, realized that change was possible if everyone stood up for the truth together. Everyone who took part in the struggle, from the youngest to the oldest, felt that today they had become part of something great, that their voices, their actions could change the world for the better. And so, under the cover of dawn, when the first rays of the sun penetrated the courtroom, J.D. Vance, addressing the audience, said the last words that became the manifesto of a new era. "Truth and justice are the forces that cannot be defeated. If you believe in change, if you want to live in a world where evil has no place, support this path. Like, comment, subscribe. This is your voice. This is your power. Together we can do the impossible." These words, filled with hope and determination, became the final chord in this story, leaving in everyone's hearts a feeling that the fight for truth continues and that they can become its winners. Today, this story lives in the hearts of people, reminding us that even the most powerful enemies can fall if people with a clear conscience stand up for the truth. Let everyone who heard this call make their contribution to the fight for justice. Support, share, Tell your friends. After all, our common strength is that we are not afraid to tell the truth and stand up for our ideals. If you feel that the world can change for the better, if you believe in the power of justice, click like, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments. Together, we can build a world where justice lives, and corruption and evil will remain only a shadow of the past.